The year is 48 AD. A 15-year-old girl crosses the threshold of the Palatine Palace. White silk clings to her body, a myrtle crown adorns her hair. The Senate rises. The people shout their approval. Emperor Claudius, 50 years old, with his left leg dragging, words catching in his throat, takes her small hand in his. Her name is Valeria Messalina. Rome expects her to save them. The blood of murdered Caligula is barely cleaned from these corridors. 4 years of madness, executions for entertainment, incest paraded as imperial prerogative. A reign so unhinged that his own guards killed him in a tunnel beneath this very palace. Rome needs stability, virtue, hope. They believe this young bride will provide it. In 10 years, she will transform this palace into something the ancient sources can hardly describe without trembling. Senators will become her prisoners. Aristocrats will disappear into her chambers and return changed, silent, broken, bound by secrets they will carry to their graves. She will orchestrate orgies that would shock professional courtesans. She will engineer blackmail on a scale that would impress modern intelligence agencies. She will marry another man while still empress, in broad daylight, with witnesses, as if daring Rome itself to stop her. And when they finally do, her statues will be dragged through the streets and smashed. Her name will be chiseled from every inscription. Official histories will be rewritten as if she never existed. Damnatio memoriae. Damnation of memory. 2,000 years later, you're still here, still listening. Because the things Rome tried hardest to erase are the things we cannot stop unearthing. What happens when corruption is not a symptom of power, but power itself? Let's go back to 38 AD. The forum is filled with noise. Merchants selling silk, senators arguing about grain shipments, children running between marble columns. Rome seems invincible, but the rot is already there. Tiberius died 2 years ago, paranoid and hated, isolated on Capri. Then came Caligula. 4 years of madness, executions as theater. A horse nearly appointed to the Senate. Senators forced to watch while he violated their wives at dinner parties. When the Praetorians finally moved, on January 24th, 41 AD, 29 stab wounds ended the nightmare. His wife died beside him. Their infant daughter's skull was smashed against a marble wall. Rome breathed, then panicked. Who comes after the monster? They found him hiding behind a curtain. Claudius, the family embarrassment with his stutter and limp. 50 years old. He never wanted power. The guard proclaimed him emperor anyway, not because he had the qualifications, but because he was alive, and Rome needed someone wearing purple before the city tore itself apart. Claudius knows he's a placeholder. He needs legitimacy, an heir, a dynasty, so he marries Valeria Messalina, 15 years old, third-degree cousin. A bloodline stretching back to Augustus himself, a beauty that poets describe as carved from marble. Pale golden hair, features that seem sculpted by divine hands. She has been raised for this. Educated in virtue, taught to lower her eyes, to speak softly, to embody the chastity that Roman civilization supposedly represents. On paper, she's perfect. The Senate approves. The people celebrate. The empire has a future. But here's the question no one asks. What happens when you take a child and dress her as a goddess? When you place her in a palace where every door opens at her command? Where senators bow, where her husband is twice her age and terrified of losing power? When you tell her that all her value lies in grace and purity, that she must be modest, obedient, chaste, a living symbol of virtue? When you give unlimited power to someone whose only training is not to use it? What happens when the gap between what she's forced to be publicly and what she wants privately becomes an abyss? Rome is about to discover. The first 2 years are perfect textbook. Messalina gives Claudius a daughter, Claudia Octavia. Then a son, Britannicus, named for his father's conquest of Britain. The Senate breathes relief. The empire has heirs. She's presented to the state wrapped in modest robes, head covered, eyes lowered. Every gesture choreographed for virtue. The perfect Roman matron. In public, she's everything Rome demands. In private, things are different. Rome has always divided its women into 2 categories. The matrona and the meretrix. The wife and the prostitute. The sacred and the profane. One lives in the atrium, raises children, embodies virtue. The other lives in the brothel, provides pleasure, exists outside respectability. The system works because these categories never touch. Messalina decides to be both. The first whispers arrive around 42 AD. A senator returns late from Ostia. Business ran slow. He's in Rome for the night. He walks through the Subura, the narrow streets that reek of piss and wine. A neighborhood where oil lamps burn low and you can disappear into darkness. He chooses a brothel, pays his coins. A woman enters. Dark wig. Heavy kohl smeared around her eyes. A perfume that's too sweet. Myrrh and roses covering something that smells expensive. She turns to him. Their eyes meet. He recognizes the Empress of Rome. Pliny the Elder, writing decades later, confirms this with access to palace insiders. This wasn't rumor. Messalina would take the name Lysiska and became a regular at a brothel managed by a woman named Scylla. Not for money, not from desperation, for the thrill. Think about the psychology. Every client who didn't recognize her became an unwitting accomplice. Every man who did recognize her became someone she owned. Because what would he do? Denounce the Empress? To whom? He wasn't just breaking rules, he was weaponizing the hypocrisy Rome had created. Because Roman morality had always been performance, senators kept mistresses, generals visited brothels, married men slept with slaves. And nobody blinked, but women, especially aristocratic women, especially the Empress, were supposed to be above desire. Marble vessels for bloodlines, symbols. Messalina looked at that cage and walked out the door. Would she return before dawn, remove the wig, wash away the scented oils, dress in imperial silk, attend morning sacrifice to Vesta, goddess of chastity, with the same serene face she had hours before, as if nothing happened? But the brothel was just a laboratory. The real operation happened inside the palace. Imagine the banquets. The elite of Rome, reclining on silk couches around low tables, gold platters filled with roasted peacock and honey-glazed dormice. Wine flowing from jeweled cups, senators chatting, generals discussing Britain. Very Roman, very civilized. Until Messalina gave the signal, servants withdrew, doors closed, new guests arrived, gladiators still smelling of sand and blood. Theater actors, sailors from Ostia. Sometimes adolescent sons of patrician families, summoned under pretense of discussing their fathers' careers. What happened after the doors closed is described by ancient sources with horrified fascination. Forced exhibitions, humiliating performances. Senators paired with their political enemies and ordered to entertain the Empress. Aristocratic women, respectable wives, terrified, forced to perform like prostitutes while their husbands watched from across the room, motionless. Refusal wasn't an option. A tribune declined an invitation. 3 days later, he was found floating in the Tiber. A nobleman tried leaving early. His family lost their estates by the weekend. Word spread. The Empress doesn't accept no. Then came the contest. The story appears in Pliny the Elder, a competition between the Empress and a famous prostitute named Scylla. Not for money, for pride. Who could service more partners in one night? The prostitute managed 25. Messalina won. Pliny writes it as if documenting an eclipse, with clinical precision and fascinated horror. True? Exaggerated? We'll never know for certain. But the story survived because it captured something Romans couldn't articulate. A woman exercising sexual power not as subordinate but as domination. Rome didn't have language for this, so it transformed her into myth. But myths don't come from nothing. They reflect something that happened, something people witnessed and tried to process, even when they tried to forget. The palace becomes a theater of power, where humiliation is currency. Where senators arrive at dusk to request favors and leave at midnight after completing acts they'll never speak of again. Where aristocrats send their daughters to the Empress's chambers and pray they return unchanged. Most do, some don't. Nobody asks, because now everyone understands the system. Messalina doesn't just exercise power, she collects leverage. Person by person, building a network of complicity so complete that nobody can move against her without destroying themselves. Every participant becomes a prisoner. Every witness becomes an accomplice. She doesn't need Senate approval, she has their shame. That's better than loyalty. Loyalty can change. Shame lasts forever. And through it all, Claudius works, building aqueducts, reforming courts, expanding the empire into Britain. The competent administrator everyone underestimated. Does he know? Of course he knows. Rome is terrible at keeping secrets, senators whisper. His own freedmen beg him to act, but what can he do? She's the mother of his heirs. To move against her means admitting betrayal before the entire empire. Means civil war. Means proving every critic right, that he was always too weak to control his own household. So he does what powerful men have done throughout history when confronted with unbearable truth. He looks away, works harder, pretends the corruption isn't spreading. Until 48 AD, 10 years after their marriage. The year everything ends. It's autumn. Claudius is in Ostia, overseeing grain shipments to Rome, a critical mission. The city survives on Egyptian grain, and any disruption means riots. He's doing his job, being the competent administrator Rome needs. Meanwhile, in Rome, Messalina marries again, Gaius Silius, a consul designate. One of the most powerful men in Rome. Young, handsome, ambitious. Everything Claudius isn't. But here's the detail that breaks your mind. She doesn't hide it. This isn't clandestine affair. This is a public wedding, with witnesses, with contracts, with formal ceremony, while she's still married to the emperor. The ancient sources describe it with stunned precision. Tacitus writes of the incredulity, the moment of freeze when Rome watches the empress take another husband in broad daylight. As if rules simply no longer applied to her. Was it a power play? A coup? Did she think Claudius was too weak to react? Did Silius believe he could replace the emperor through marriage? Or had Messalina reached the point where transgression itself was the goal? Where the thrill didn't come from secrecy, but from daring Rome to stop her? We don't know her thoughts, we only know her actions. And Rome, the corrupt, compromised, exhausted Rome, finally found its limit. Narcissus, Claudius's most trusted freedman. He learns the news first, rushes to Ostia, finds the emperor examining grain tallies. Imagine that conversation. How do you tell an emperor his wife just married someone else? The news kept coming. Senators confirmed it. Witnesses came forward, the detail that broke him. The marriage contract was signed. Legal, witnessed, undeniable. The laughter stops. Imagine his face at that moment. The emperor everyone mocked, the stammering scholar. The man who survived by being underestimated, betrayed publicly, legally, while he ensured Rome wouldn't starve. The anger that rises isn't hot. It's cold, final. He returns to Rome with the Praetorians at his back. They find her in the gardens of Lucullus, a vast estate overlooking the city, trees imported from across the empire, fountains that never stop flowing. The place where she'd hosted so many of her parties. She's with her mother, Lepida. The old woman is begging her daughter to act, to flee, to do something. But Messalina seems paralyzed. Some sources say she tried writing a petition asking for mercy. Others say she just stood there, incapable of believing it was ending. That after 10 years of Rome bending to her will, Rome was finally saying no. The soldiers arrive. She recognizes them, has seen them at the palace, perhaps summoned some to her chambers. Now they're here for her. She kneels, begs, offers her children as hostages. Octavia and Britannicus, 9 and 7 years old, offers everything. The soldiers don't respond. Orders are orders. She's handed a dagger by someone. Maybe her mother, maybe a guard. Her hand shakes. She presses the blade to her throat. She can't do it. A centurion steps forward. His name was never recorded, but his action was. He drives the blade home. Valeria Messalina Augusta, Empress of Rome, dies at 25 in her own blood on grass, where she once held power over senators. Claudius orders damnatio memoriae, damnation of memory. Her statues are dragged through streets and destroyed. Her name is chiseled from every inscription. Official histories are rewritten as if she never existed. The message is clear. She never was. But 2,000 years later, we're still talking about her. Claudius remarried within months. His niece, Agrippina the Younger, smarter than Messalina, more patient. In the end, she would poison Claudius and place her son Nero as emperor, starting another cycle of madness. Messalina's children suffered tragic fates. Her daughter Octavia was forced to marry Nero, her stepbrother. Later, he had her executed, claiming adultery. She was 22. Her son Britannicus was poisoned at 14, probably by Nero to eliminate any rival claiming the throne. He collapsed during dinner, dead before anyone could move. The Senate pretended Messalina never existed, but soldiers remembered, servants remembered. Families whose daughters disappeared into her chambers and returned silent, they remembered. This is what haunts me about her story. How much of what we know about Messalina is true? Our sources, Tacitus, Suetonius, Dio, were all men, all writing decades after her death, all with political reasons to paint her as monster. Roman history had a pattern. Powerful women who threatened male authority were always accused of sexual depravity. Cleopatra, Agrippina, Livia, Messalina. The script never changed. Does this mean she was innocent? No. The marriage to Silius happened. Even her defenders admit it. The political maneuvering was real. The blackmail network existed. People who opposed her died. But the stories about brothels, contests, specific numbers, we'll never know where truth ends and propaganda begins. What we know is this. A 15-year-old was married to a man in his 50s. She'd been told all her value lay in purity and obedience. She'd been given immense power, but no instruction on how to use it. No guidance, no purpose except producing heirs and appearing virtuous. And when she found a way to feel powerful through transgression, through control, by turning Rome's hypocrisy against itself, the empire that created her, destroyed her, then spent 2,000 years defining her as monster. Stand today among Palatine ruins, and you feel something in the air. Not ghosts, but something heavier. The weight of histories they couldn't silence, even when they erased the names. Because this is truth about damnatio memoriae. It doesn't work. You can destroy statues, chisel away inscriptions, rewrite documents, but you cannot delete lessons. Messalina's name was meant to disappear. Instead, it became immortal. Not because Rome wanted her remembered, but because truth, however distorted, however buried, has a way of surfacing. Messalina's story isn't just about sex or scandal. It's about what happens when power becomes a game. When shame becomes currency. When people meant to rule an empire are too compromised to stop the decay. Every senator she humiliated who stayed silent. Every general she blackmailed who remained loyal. Every witness to her parties who became accomplice. Not from loyalty, from shame. She proved you don't need an army to control men. You just need to know what they fear people discovering. We like thinking we're different now, evolved beyond Rome's corruption. But look at any modern government, any institution of power. How many secrets hold them together? How many people stay silent because exposure would destroy them? How much of what we call stability is just complicity? Marcus Aurelius wrote something 100 years after Messalina's death. By then, he was emperor, trying to make sense of Rome's infinite cycles of virtue and corruption. Look beneath the surface. Let neither the particular quality nor value of anything escape you. Was he thinking of leaders like her, people whose surfaces gleamed while their cores rotted? Why is Messalina's lesson? That she was simply evil? The lesson is that Rome created her, gave power to a 15-year-old, gave her authority without purpose, then destroyed her when she used that power in ways that unmasked their hypocrisy. Her name was erased, her story survived. And 2,000 years later, we're still trying to understand what it means when people given power to preserve virtue become architects of its destruction. You just witnessed one of history's darkest chapters. A story Rome tried to bury, but failed. If accounts like this remind you how fragile empires are, how power corrupts in ways we prefer not seeing, then understanding these patterns matters. Because the moment we forget these lessons is the moment we're destined to repeat them. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe. Share this video with those who love history. Only through knowledge can we learn from the past. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video.